everyone, welcome back to the channel. How are you doing? Sunday evening, and I'm going to do a little video here called Third Eye, the Tool story. It's 24 minutes. Let's crack into it. Okay, here we go. Raw Music TV, thank you very much.
Tool is without doubt an enigma of a band. Throughout their career, they have rarely given interviews, and when they do, they're often quite cryptic in their response. They avoid discussing their personal life and childhoods, instead letting the music speak for itself. But unless you listen carefully, you probably won't appreciate what they're trying to say. To date, they have released 5 studio albums, all of which just as fascinating as the one preceding it. Their third record even incorporates a mathematical premise called the Fibonacci sequence, which was used to structure the title track Lateralis. The Fibonacci sequence itself appears in nature, specifically biological settings such as the arrangements of leaves on a stem, and is often referred to as the golden ratio. The golden ratio is a design concept based on using the Fibonacci sequence to create visually appealing proportions in art, architecture, and graphic design. The proportion, size, and placement of one element compared to another is said to create a sense of harmony that our subconscious mind is attracted to. In the few interviews Tool have given, Maynard James Keenan has stated how it's important to experience the good and bad in life with balance, a metaphor for symmetry, which the golden ratio represents, also known as the divine proportion. Maynard's lyrics often address life, death, and everything in between. The idea of an artist using the Fibonacci sequence isn't anything new. It's said that Leonardo da Vinci used the golden ratio during the Renaissance period that spanned the 14th, 15th, and 16th century. Tool, however, took this concept in a completely new direction by incorporating it into their already profoundly mystical expression of music. Tool seems to have found a new audience with each new conception of their existence. Whether you discovered them by hearing Sober from Undertow, Stinkfist from Ænima, or Schism from Lateralis, most fans know exactly where they were and what they were doing the first time they heard their music. Tool is a band that has left a very interesting mark on the world of music, and this is their story.
Good intro.
Maynard James Keenan, born James Herbert Keenan on April the 17th, 1964 in Ohio. Very little is known about his childhood and upbringing. We do, however, know that his parents divorced at an early age in 1968, causing his father to move some distance away to Michigan. Whilst Keenan would rarely see his father after this for several years, his mother convinced him to relocate to Michigan to live with his father when he was 13. As Maynard was starting to get into trouble in Ohio. Keenan has been painted as quite the gifted child in a few interviews he's given over the years, and claimed that Ohio wasn't a place for a creative person. Because Ohio sucks and I was surrounded by dead people, he says. There are also hints that he may have been abused during his childhood by his stepfather after his mother remarried. But this has never been fully confirmed by him. Although Maynard did say that his move to Michigan was also to get away from his creepy stepfather. Tool even released a song in 1993 with a very disturbing video that was banned by MTV due to the nature of its content that allegedly addressed the issue of abuse. It took so long to remember just what happened. I was so young and vestal then. You know it hurt me. Maynard was exposed to music from an early age. He would spend weekends at his auntie's house and specifically recalls 2 records from this period of his life that would guide his musical taste. These records were Black Sabbath by Black Sabbath, released in 1970, and Blue by Joni Mitchell, released in 1971.
But let's not talk about fairy wells now.
Other influences of Maynard were Pink Floyd, The Swans, Devo, Low, and even citing Ashes to Ashes by David Bowie as one of his favourite videos when it came to an artist's visual creativity. It's important to note that Maynard, as well as the rest of Tool, all share an incredibly wide range of musical tastes and influences, so the examples here are but a mere snapshot. Maynard was also influenced heavily by comedy shows such as Monty Python, Kids in the Hall, and even Steve Martin records. During his childhood, after moving to live with his father, Maynard worked in apple and peach orchards during the summer, where he seemed to develop a taste for nature and working outdoors.
I think the rock, the misconception on the rock thing is that that's what I had to set out to do. It was kind of an accident. I kind of grew up in a small town. I worked in, peach orchards as a kid in the summer. I was basically right at the end of junior high, going into high school. And before I'd moved there, his house wasn't properly grounded and they got hit by lightning and it blew up their TV. So I spent all of high school with no TV. He's like, you know what, let's just leave it alone. We'll go do other things. So he was a wrestling coach. I got into cross country and wrestling and we, fishing and working in the garden and stuff like that. So I got more into my head, like writing and doing that kind of thing.
After graduating high school, aged 18, Maynard joined the army for 3 years and upon his departure studied sculpture at art college. In an interview with Patton Oswalt back in 2007, Maynard said the only reason he joined the army is because the GI Bill would actually pay for his tuition, allowing him to go to Kendall College of Art and Design after his service in Grand Rapids, Michigan. Attending art school was somewhat of a dream for Maynard.
Yeah, wasn't sure what I was going to do, but my dad definitely said, when you graduate, here's the deal. You're paying rent for your room, or you're cutting wood for your room, or you're getting a job and getting the hell out of here. So we cut wood for the summer, but I ended up, I saw stripes, and that pretty much set the hook, it can't be that bad. I can go hang out with Bill Murray. Yeah, I took some tests, and I realized that I was one of those lazy underachievers, and they quickly got me into the West Point Prep School over in Jersey. So I ended up getting my appointment to West Point, and then declining at last minute to go to art school.
Grand Rapids would also be home to one of Maynard's early musical projects, Children of the Anachronistic Dynasty, also known as CAD for short. CAD consisted of Maynard and Kevin Horning, with Maynard writing most of the material. CAD recorded 2 albums on cassette, Fingernails, recorded in Maynard's living room in 1986, and Dog House, recorded in 1987. These early recordings clearly portray Maynard's desire to experiment with expression and creativity. In 1989, Tool guitarist Adam Jones would meet Maynard through a mutual friend. That mutual friend would be Tom Morello of Rage Against the Machine. Jones and Morello were in a band together in high school, and Maynard would often hang out with Morello to discuss the music of bands such as Devo. Maynard also introduced Morello to the Swans, which Morello said was way outside of his comfort zone. When it calls my number, I will be there. Jones had been jamming with several bands that just didn't work out until Maynard played him a demo of his old band. I had been jamming with a bunch of different bands at the time, but none of them were really working out. Then one day, Maynard played me a tape of some joke band he was in. I just thought, you can sing. He really blew my mind. From that point on, I bugged him until he finally gave in and joined me. Drummer Danny Carey just happened to be Maynard's neighbour and would play drums for them when they started jamming. Despite Maynard and Jones inviting musicians to join them, people just didn't show up. Danny said he felt sorry for them, so he filled in on drums. By this point, all members of Tool had relocated to Los Angeles. Adam Jones was working in the creative world of Hollywood. Between 1985 and 1993, he worked as a lab technician and special effects artist on films such as Return of the Living Dead, Ghostbusters 2, Edward Scissorhands, as well as Jurassic Park and Terminator 2: Judgment Day. Before high school, Adam Jones was learning to play the violin, which we can assume would have been via the classical music method of training. He developed a taste for the likes of AC/DC, Led Zeppelin, and even country music during high school. He was drawn towards the guitar as his older brother had an electric guitar and would play along to The Police, Chicago, and even Fleetwood Mac. Whilst drummer Danny Carey became a big fan of 70s English rock band XTC. Carey also stated in an interview that the Discipline album by King Crimson, released in 1981, was a big part of his early musical influence. The final member would be a friend of Adam's, Paul D'Amour, on bass. This early fascination with intriguing time signatures and experimental new wave post-punk music, along with art, brought the four members of Tool together, officially forming in 1990, and it wouldn't be long before record labels were desperate to sign them to a recording contract.
I met Maynard. He moved out to LA, and through mutual Libertyville friends, Tom Morello and a bunch of other people that, still all hang out together. Maynard was dating this girl from Libertyville, and that's how he and I met, and we just hit it off. Driving around his car, listening to Metallica and, watching Italian horror movies. And he's also just this person who's very driven. This thing I realized, I have always done really great things because I kind of surrounded myself with people who are motivated, people who are heroes. At some point, Maynard and I were talking about, let's start a band. It'd be fun just to, mess around. We had some other friends, and then Maynard just slipped me this tape. And he goes, yeah, here, check this out. It's just something I was doing back in Michigan. And I was like, oh, you can sing. Maynard, you can sing. And he knew it. He just didn't have the confidence, I think, to kind of go, yeah, I'm a good singer.
Oh, you must have known.
The enigma of Tool started early on, as Maynard would state in an interview that the band were inspired by the philosophy of lachrymology, which later turned out to be a completely fabricated story. Maynard said the band read a book titled The Joyful Guide to Lachrymology, supposedly published in 1949 by an amateur philosopher called Ronald P. Vincent, who explored the science of lachrymology, which Tool emphasized was the study of pain or the study of crying. This was later labeled a pseudo-philosophy, and while some Tool fans claim to have read the book, not a single copy has ever been made available for public viewing. Some people have even left reviews for the book across the internet, but it seems as if Tool fans are just playing into the story. Tool do make reference to L. Ron Hubbard in the song Rosetta Stone, taken from their 2006 album 10,000 Days. Hubbard was the founder of Scientology, which many also consider to be a pseudo-philosophy or a fake religion. So from this, it's easy to see that the band certainly have an interest in aspects of philosophy, be it real or fake, and how these concepts affect the world around us. Tool wanted to have control of their narrative and their art from the beginning, which is why they chose to sign to a small label called Zoo Entertainment. The label offered them a much smaller deal, but a lot more control over their material. However, Zoo would often go against the wishes of Tool when it came to promotion. Adam Jones especially didn't want the band to be categorized as a metal band and specifically told the label not to promote them alongside other metal bands to local radio stations, but the label did so anyway. On a major or bigger label though, they may not have been able to get away with creating a fictitious philosophical origin story to feed to the media. Nevertheless, in March of 1992, Zoo would release the first official offering from Tool, a 6-track EP by the name of Opiate. Opiate spawned the first Tool music video for the song Hush. The video garnered some attention on a Canadian music channel, Much Music. The EP also included a hidden track, The Gaping Lotus Experience. Many hidden tracks have deep meanings, and some aren't even discovered by the listener at all for years. For Tool's hidden track, The Gaping Lotus Experience, it was simply the result of the band randomly jamming in the studio, and they decided to include it on the EP. And once again, referencing religion and philosophy, the title for the EP is said to derive from a quote by Karl Marx, a German philosopher, economist, and socialist who once said, "Religion is the opium of the people." April the 6th, 1993 would see Tool release their debut record, Undertow. The album would be produced by Sylvia Massey, who had also worked on the Opiate EP. Massey had already worked on some notable LPs prior to her collaboration with Tool, such as Pleasures of the Flesh by Exodus in 1987, Joe Satriani's record Surfing with the Alien, and even Jefferson Starship, leading to quite a diverse list of production credits. She also produced the Green Jello LP Serial Killer in 1991, a comedy rock band formed in 1981 that had featured both Maynard and Danny Carey. With the 80s metal scene dying out and grunge dominating the early 90s, Tool had a good chance of standing out in the crowd. But were the crowd even ready for Tool? Grunge was at the peak of its popularity. Nirvana had given us Smells Like Teen Spirit from the album Nevermind. Alice in Chains had unleashed Facelift. And Stone Temple Pilots peaked at number 3 on the Billboard charts with their debut record, Core. So where exactly were Tool going to fit in amongst all of this? To start with, several superstores refused to sell the album due to the artwork depicting nudity in the liner notes, which resulted in Tool reissuing the album to feature just a giant barcode. The new record also came with a note inside that said the following: "It came to our attention recently that many stores across our fine and open-minded nation would not stock Undertow because of our explicit artwork. Although we loathe being censored, we still want you to hear our music, so we took it out. However, it is available to you at no extra cost. Fill out the form, stick it in an envelope, mail it in, and we will send you the original artwork. Love, Tool." Tool had crossed out the phrase, "We want your money," most likely a dig at capitalism or at least the corporate music machine, suggesting they simply wanted to be heard as artists. Sober would be the first single taken from the debut record. It's also said to be somewhat of a reworked version of an early CAD song called Burn About Out. With the general concept referencing to how some people can only release their artistic expression when under the influence of a substance. In an interview regarding the song in 1994, Jones said, "I don't tell people to do or not do drugs. You can do what you want, but you have to take responsibility for what happens. If you become addicted and a junkie, well, that's your fault." Sober is considered by many to be a breakthrough single for Tool, even winning them a Billboard Award for Best Video by a New Artist at the time. And although Sober was essentially considered to be a commercial hit in some regards, Adam Jones didn't seem too happy about it. It's almost as if he wanted Tool to stay more of an underground band. "It hasn't been really important to us to get in the top 40 and that whole rat race. I'm not into being jammed down people's throats. We have meetings with our record label to tell them how to market us. If we didn't, they'd just promote us like they promote everyone else. What's important to us is not how many albums we're selling, it's making real music for people who appreciate it." Tool appeared to have an almost naive outlook when it came to accepting the very nature of the music industry. They had no say in whether or not they would become commercially successful or whether their records would end up in a bargain bin for $2 at a local gas station. They also had no idea that with the release of each forthcoming album, they would develop an almost cult-like following. The censorship of Tool would continue with their second studio album, Ænima, released in September of 1996. Original bass player Paul D'Amour would be replaced by Justin Chancellor, and the band would bring in Canadian producer David Bottrill. Bottrill was an interesting choice as he had previously worked on the King Crimson record Thrack, released a year earlier. At first, Bottrill assumed he was merely a backup choice if Tool didn't secure the actual producer they wanted, and maybe there's some truth to that. Producer Rhett Davis, who worked on Crimson's Discipline album, the very same that Danny Carey fell in love with, had essentially retired by this time. But it seemed clear Tool were hoping to channel some of their love for King Crimson into Ænima. The record itself debuted at number 2 on the Billboard 200 chart, selling close to 150,000 copies in its first week alone. Ænima narrowly lost out on the number 1 spot thanks to Nirvana's live album, From the Muddy Banks of the Wishgar, selling just close to 160,000 copies. It wasn't just that they knew the album would be censored in part, they also chose to dedicate the record to legendary comedian Bill Hicks, who passed away 2 years prior. The final track on the album even starts out with an audio excerpt of Bill saying if you think drugs are bad, then you should go home and burn all of your tapes and CDs, because most of those artists were under the influence when creating some of the most influential music of all time. This seemed like a very fitting and ironic tribute to Bill Hicks due to the fact he was the first comedian to be censored and banned by CBS after he appeared on the David Letterman Show on October 1st, 1993, after delivering an apparently offensive monologue. Tool and Hicks seem to share one very strong set of beliefs, amongst others of course, and that was how the masses are brainwashed by governments, religion, and the media. Hicks once referred to the television as Lucifer's dream box. So how very apt that Tool were yet again being censored by the media, whilst also trying to promote the work of another heavily censored artist. It's almost as if freedom of speech wasn't so free after all. Despite facing legal battles with their record label, censorship from the media, and several rumours of the band splitting up over the years, they continue to produce some of the most intriguing music and artistic concepts that the music industry has seen to date. At least in the alternative genres of the spectrum anyway. The mysterious artwork, cryptic lyrics, and strange on-stage performances and personas have all contributed to the enigma that Tool have presented to us since their very inception. And whilst they can often appear to be more of an underground band with a cult-like following, they've won 4 Grammy Awards, most recently for the single Fear Inoculum from the album of the same name released in 2019, charted numerous times on the US Billboard 200, including a number 1 slot for their 2006 record 10,000 Days, amongst others, and have even seen their albums certified double and triple platinum in the US. Certainly not the traits of a band with simply a small, devoted following. There is no denying, however, Tool is indeed an incredibly complicated artist, which to truly understand would take far longer than this presentation could ever offer in such a short space of time. Besides, isn't life far more interesting with the mystery of reflection?
I I've had that one on my play later list for quite some time now, so glad I finally got around to doing it. Really interesting, really good information, really good video. Thanks Raw Music TV. I will link the video in the description if you want to go and watch that without me in your face while you're doing so. And I'm happy to say a lot of the stuff I did know from the information that you've given me and the stuff that I've found out about Tool when I started the journey. And I still hope that there is more to come from them. I really do, as I'm sure all of you do too. Let me know if there's any other documentaries that you think are interesting like that. Now that I've heard all of their music, it is interesting to get a little insight and background information about what was going on at the time. So link them in the comments if you've got them. Hit the subscribe, hit the like, and I'll see you back for some more videos.